You know, in boxing, the decade of the 1970s belonged to the heavyweights, and this guy, who was a very talented young prospect via Hungary, through England, and internationally, became a major contender in that decade. Unfortunately, the great Joe Bugner has passed away at the age of 75, actually today, September 1st. So today we're going to be talking about his, not his whole career, but how he found his way into the top 10 internationally as a young battler. Now, the 1970s, he had just turned 20. The native of Salzburg, Hungary. His family fled this 56 Soviet invasion and settled in Britain. 6'4", 230 pounds. He twice held the British and British Commonwealth heavyweight titles. Was a three-time European champion. Now, he did retire in 76, but made sporadic comebacks over the next 2 decades with varying success, and won what they call a WBF heavyweight title in 1998 at the age of 48 against James Wollcarcher Smith, himself a former heavyweight champion. Now, he had a short amateur career. He competed 16 times, winning 13 matches. Now, in 1970, he emerged internationally as an outstanding young prospect and was world rated by the end of the year. He won 9 consecutive bouts in that campaign, including victories over well-known boxers such as Chuck Wepner, Manuel Ramos, Johnny Prescott, Brian London, Eduardo Carletti, Charlie Polite, and George Johnson. Now, my good friend Mitch Chavallo, George's son and a follower of the channel, can basically tell you only George Chavallo fought more highly ranked heavyweights than Joe Bugner, because Bugner was fighting everybody. He was now positioned to challenge world-rated Englishman Henry Cooper, who had nearly knocked out Muhammad Ali a few years previously, for Cooper's the British Commonwealth, and European belts. However, because Bugner was still too young to fight for the British Commonwealth title, the minimum age was 21 years old at the time. He was only 20. This much anticipated bout had to be postponed until the following year. While waiting to come of age, in 71 he defeated Carl Gizzi and drew with Bill Drover just weeks later, and some ends before facing Cooper. Now, Bugner earned a reputation early in his pro career as a tough, durable, but often exceptionally defensive and cautious boxer. He retained that image for the rest of his career, like he wouldn't get hurt, but he couldn't hurt anybody. He was often criticized for lacking natural aggression in the ring. Some observers argued that Bugner's heart was never in boxing, after an early opponent, Ulrich Regis, died from brain injury soon after being outpointed by Bugner at London Shoreditch Town Hall. Now, the Cooper bout. In March 71, he met veteran Cooper and won a 15-round decision. Bugner won the bout by the slimmest of margins, 1/4 point on the card of lone official Harry Gibbs. The British sporting public and press were deeply divided about the verdict. Many felt that Cooper deserved the decision due to his steady aggression, but Bugner fought effectively on the defense and often scored with his left jab. The Times, among others, scored a fight in favor of Bugner. Still, the outcome of the bout is regarded as one of the most controversial in British boxing history. Now, with the victory, Bugner was now the British Commonwealth and European champion, and the first time he was ranked among the world's top 10. Bugner would remain in the world rankings for much of the 70s. Now, Bugner retained his European title with a decision over tough German heavyweight Jürgen Blind, one of Ali's former opponents. However, later in 71, Bugner surprisingly lost decisions to underdogs Jack Bedell and Larry Middleton. Sandwiched between these losses was a victory over Mike Boswell. The Bedell fight was particularly costly, depriving Bugner of his British Commonwealth and European titles. His relative inexperience, his youth, and a lack of extensive amateur background were the chief causes of these defeats, especially against Bedell, because Bedell would build up points. Now, in 72, he won 8 consecutive fights, including a knockout over Jürgen Blind for the European title. By the end of this, Bugner demonstrated much improved ring ability and acquired enough experience that his manager began seeking matches against the world's best heavyweights. Now, he began 73 by retaining his European belt with a victory over capable Dutchman Rudy Lubbers, again another former Ali opponent. The 22-year-old Bugner then lost 12-round decision to Ali and Frazier. Despite being clearly defeated, Bugner fought well and won the respect of the boxing media and the public alike in these 2 fights. After their bout, Ali declared that Bugner was capable of being world champion. Ali's trainer Angelo Dundee later echoed that sentiment. The fight with Frazier in July 73 at Earl's Court in London was deemed a classic. After being knocked down by a tremendous left hook in the 10th, he arose and staggered Frazier to close the round. Frazier took the decision, but only narrowly, and arguably only George Foreman and Muhammad Ali ever gave Frazier a harder fight. And a lot of people were claiming he was the great white hope of that era, which I really don't understand, but that's what they call him. Many regard the Frazier bout as being Bugner's best career performance. After the Ali-Frazier fights, Bugner won 8 bouts in a row, his most notable victories being over ex-WBA World Heavyweight Champion Jimmy Ellis, and of course the highly regarded Mac Foster. By the end of '74, he was rated among the top 5 heavyweight contenders in the world. Now, when Bugner challenged Ali for the world title in June '75, the bout being held in Kuala Lumpur, with Ali winning a relatively one-sided 15-round decision. Bugner said in reports after the fight he was more interested in chasing women before that fight than fighting. Bugner performed fairly well, but maintained a strictly defensive posture throughout most of the fight, perhaps due to blistering tropical heat, and as a result, he was widely scorned by the media and the public. In an interview during an April 2008 reunion with Henry Cooper, Bugner defended his tactics in the Ali fight as being necessary due to extreme temperature and humidity of the outside venue. Now, early in '76, he announced his retirement from boxing, stating that he no longer felt motivated to fight professionally. He was only in his mid-20s. Within months, however, he returned to the ring, expressing disgust at Richard Dunn's performance against Ali, and in October he blasted on Richard Dunn the first to reclaim the British Commonwealth, and the European titles. Onlookers state he had never seen Bugner angry before, and that while Dunn's supporters had waged a quite unsportsmanlike campaign against Bugner, if he had fought like that in his early career, he could have gone further. Now, in '77, Bugner lost a close 12-round decision from home to top contender Ron Lyle. The scores were 57-53 and 56-54 for Lyle and 55-54 for Bugner. After this match, he again retired, making only sporadic comebacks in the ring over the next decades. So you look at his 1970s career, ladies and gentlemen, just to give you a whole perspective on this. Again, he didn't have a big amateur career, but you look at the fights he had taken on. Johnny Prescott, Roberto Davila, Manuel Reyes, Ray Patterson, Brian London, Chuck Wepner, Hector Carletti, George Johnson, Miguel Paez, Carol Gizzi, Bill Drofer, Cooper, Blinn, Bedell, Boswell, Middleton, O'Melia, Leroy Caldwell, Mark Hands, Doug Kirk, Paul Nielsen, Jurgen Blinn, Tony Doyle, Dante Kane, Rudy Lubbers, Ali-Frazier, Giuseppe Ross, Mac Foster, Pat Duncan, Guillermo Baruzzi, Jose Luis Garcia, Jimmy Ellis, Santiago Lavelle, Dante Kane, Ali again, Richard Dunn, Ron Lyle, Gilberto Acuna, and a big comeback again was the fight against Shavers in '82, but that's a story for another time. So again, he won the titles back, the big 3 against Richard Dunn, retained the European title against Dante Kane in '75, and also Guillermo Baruzzi. So he was winning on points a lot of these fights, and there's a main reason why, because he was a very defensive fighter. Now, he did have 2 exhibitions against Ali, a non-scored bout in '74 and one in '79. So, but ironically, ladies and gentlemen, his opening career was a loss to Paul Brown, KO 3. So the tail end of his career, ladies and gentlemen, this is no joke. He must have retired 4 or 5 different times. Final record: 83 fights, 69, 13, and 1. Now, he came back, if I'm not mistaken, ladies and gentlemen. He retired for 8 years after losing to Frank Bruno in '87, and he retired after fighting Gilberto Acuna. So it was 2 or 3. Fought mostly in London, although he lost a rough decision to Marvis Frazier and Steven Tankstead as well. So he was fighting like some of the key contenders. But by my math, I think he fought 45 top 30 heavyweight contenders in his career, which is quite amazing if you ask me. But he fought all the major ones, London and Dunn and everybody else, Henry Cooper. Yeah, but ladies and gentlemen, even though Henry Cooper had lost twice to Ali, he fought well into the 1970s. Henry Cooper was a tough nut. And don't forget, he lost most of his fights by cuts, ladies and gentlemen. So Henry Cooper, again, a very, very well-loved fighter, did have his last fight against Joe Bugner. But before the fight, he had won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fights. And he had lost to Patterson and Ali back-to-back in the mid-'60s. So, I mean, Cooper was, like I said, a very strong fighter. So, ladies and gentlemen, Joe Bugner, all I can say, if all the stories I heard about this guy are true, quite the life. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you're doing with our Sports File podcast, let us know with a like, comment, subscribe, or share.